Hello, music friends. Today I have a very special guest to talk about one of the most famous music legends of all time. So, welcome, Kent Sanders, to talk to us about your upcoming book, The Faith of Elvis.
Thanks, Ashley. I appreciate it. I am thankful for the opportunity to be here, and I love this book, and I'm thrilled to talk about it. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, to start out with, can you tell us a little bit about how you got in touch with the half brother of Elvis? Is that correct?
That's stepbrother, actually.
Or stepbrother? Yes. Sorry.
Correct.
Stepbrother of Elvis. Yes.
So there's actually kind of an interesting story here. At least it's interesting to me. What's interesting to us isn't always interesting to other people. However, that being
I run
said,
into
a lot
that.
of people have asked me, how did you wind up getting involved with this project? Because this is a very high profile thing. It's with a traditional publisher. This is
Right.
actually
Is
my
it
first
Thomas
project with
Nelson? Is
a
that right?
correct.
Yes, I love their publications.
Yeah, they put
That's
out a
incredible.
lot of faith-based content. So, and I've owned and read tons of Thomas Nelson books over the years. So to be associated with something like this, it's a little bit like a dream come true as a writer or as a ghostwriter.
Oh, definitely.
So how
Definitely.
this actually happened was I have to kind of take you back a few years actually to so I've been doing podcasting for a long time. And even though my podcast has gone through several different iterations over the years, like I've done a focus on business writing and creativity, and now my show is called The Daily Writer. But the whole time I've done interviews. So for years, I've interviewed people basically on a weekly basis. And the cool thing about doing a podcast, and of course, Ashley, you know this because you do this stuff as well, you're connecting with people and doing interviews. The interesting thing is that some of those connections come back around in interesting ways that you would never have anticipated. So, because of some people that I have interviewed over the years, they knew that I was now a ghostwriter full time. And one of those friends actually is a fellow ghostwriter who is connected with a lot of book agents and a lot of other people in the publishing world because she's been doing this a really long time. So a project came to her one day from a book agent. They needed a writer for it. It wasn't a good fit for her, so she contacted me and asked if I might be interested in it. So I actually was. So I connected with the book agent, and I did a little bit of work on this project. They just needed basically like a book proposal done, and that project actually didn't end up going anywhere. I don't know what happened with their client, but it just sort of fell by the wayside, I think. But then she got in touch with me one day and said, "Hey, we have a need for a writer on this project. We've actually, just because of some publishing situations, this book has to be completed actually on a pretty fast timetable because they had made some changes to the book and whatever. But we need some." And she said, "But we need somebody who is from a faith based background." And this is of course this was the Elvis project, and
Right.
I just happened to be the perfect fit for this because I used to be a pastor. I taught at a Christian college for a long time. I've been a person my faith. I've been a person of faith for my whole life,
And
and
you're a musician,
yeah,
right?
and
Didn't
I'm a
you do music
musician.
ministry? And so, I
It's
mean, you
kind of
have
like all the
that connection as
things.
well. Yes.
It's
Yes.
like all the things that I didn't think would play into my ghostwriting career that
You're like,
that
this
I
is
sort of thought
literally
of
the
as like my
perfect
past
project
career.
ever.
Yeah, those really came into play with this project. So that's kind of how it came about. It was really just not so much being in the right place at the right time, but being available for the right project at the right time. But
Right.
more than that, just having some connections who knew my strengths and my skills,
Yes.
and then who could refer me to the right people. So that's kind of the long story of how that happened, but that's really how it all came about.
Yeah, no, I love that you have the faith-based side, you have the writing side, and you have the musical knowledge all together, which is perfect. So, yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
tell
this
us a little
this
bit
was
about Billy Stanley. What is it like working with yeah, working with him and getting to hear his first-hand accounts of being the stepbrother of Elvis?
it was fantastic. Honestly, this was a really fun collaboration. And if you hang around ghostwriters and people who are in the editing and freelance world, if you hang around those people long enough, you will very quickly hear some horror stories of clients they've worked with or people who were difficult or whatever. This was actually
Right.
the exact opposite. This was one of the easiest things I've ever worked on in terms of just um, having a great relationship with the person I was collaborating with. He's a great
Right.
storyteller. He's funny. He's really supportive, super positive, and he sort of let me do my thing and I let him do his thing. And
Wow.
it's sort of like peanut butter and jelly, when you put those two things together. I'm the writer, he's the storyteller, and I think we made a great combination. So it was a lot of fun.
And that's nice if he's naturally a storyteller, it helps your job be easier as well if he kind of
Oh my gosh, it was so
understands
much easier. I mean, literally.
understands
So
that.
just a little background on how these type of books usually happen. Um, is you get on
And the
calls.
fact that you get to have your name on it this time. Ghostwriters don't always get their names on it, but the reason I can interview about
Correct.
it is because he's letting
Correct.
you have your
Yeah.
name on it. Mhm.
Yeah. So just to give you a little background on how these books are actually created, a lot of times, at least this is the way that I do it most of the time, is you develop an outline for the book and what it's going to be about. You figure out what each chapter is going to be about and sort of the direction for each chapter. And then you get on calls, and I just ask questions. I would get on calls and I would have typically 10 to 12 questions prepped for each of the chapters that we worked on. The great thing about Billy was that I would just have to ask one simple question, and he would just go off for 20, 30 minutes sometimes. Story after
Oh,
story after
nice.
story. And the difficulty with this book honestly was that I had way more than enough material. Like the
You have
book
a
could have
word
easily been
limit.
twice as long.
Right.
But you have to
Oh,
kind of narrow it
wow.
down to a certain length and everything. So yeah, he
Right.
was fantastic to work with.
What was one of your favorite stories about Elvis that you got to include in the book?
Oh my goodness, there were so many great things. One of the things that I found so compelling is, and of course I didn't know this before because I didn't grow up with Elvis and have never really studied his life on an intense sort of level.
Right.
But one of the things that I was really surprised to learn was that Elvis looked at what he did as a musician as basically a job. Whereas
Okay.
many other celebrities will sort of look at their fame and, when Elvis was at the peak of his career, he was arguably one of the most famous people in the world, really.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes.
And most people in that position would look at what they've done and their accomplishments and really like have a lot of ego about that, or they would sort of walk around like a big time
A
celebrity all
big
the
shot.
time
Yeah.
and think they're better than everybody else. But he looked at what he did as just a job, and he would
Really?
take time to talk to people who were his fans, who were construction workers or who worked some other kinds of more of a blue collar job. And he would always tell them, your work is actually more important than mine because you keep our daily lives running. If you sweep the streets or if you lay concrete or if you're a plumber or whatever. And he would say,
That's
I'm just an
so true.
entertainer.
So good.
This is just my job. And
Wow.
I found that to be a really, really fascinating
Incredible.
insight. I love that.
I think sometimes as an artistic person, I can see what he's saying though, because we see the people that are doing kind of those more grunt work jobs, if you will. And I
Right.
see the value in those because that's harder for me even than the entertainment side. But sometimes those grunt work things are harder. And the fact that he could take the humility to acknowledge that to them, I think that's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and
And
well, the faith side, can you tell us a little bit about the faith side since that's what the book is about? And that's not what we think of when we normally first think of Elvis. Can you shed a
that's
little bit
true.
of light into that?
That's true. Well, the book, of course, is called The Faith of Elvis. So the book is really the untold story of Elvis's faith. He was a very
Hmm.
devout Christian person. He carried his Bible everywhere that he went. You can actually
Wow.
get online and look at different places where he would make notes in his Bible. He would underline things. He would copy down sayings or scripture verses or make notes underneath certain verses, that type of thing.
Wow. Hmm.
And it's really, really compelling because you kind of get a little bit of a peek into how Elvis thought and
Right.
where his faith was. And what I find so compelling about Elvis as a person of faith is not necessarily that he talked a lot about his faith on stage or I mean, although he did gospel music and he didn't hide the fact that he was a Christian, but it
No.
was more important for him to actually live out his faith. And one of the
Right.
most important ways that he did that was by being generous. And in the book, there's tons of stories that we've included that talk about how Elvis was just immensely generous to people. He would decide, you know, at different times to go down to the car dealership and buy Cadillacs for a bunch of people, or he would give away
Wow.
thousands of dollars to somebody on the street who needed it. It was
Oh my
just,
goodness.
and this actually was a point of contention with his father, Vernon, sometimes, because
Really?
Elvis just gave freely without really any regard to kind of the business side of it, but Vernon would
Right.
sometimes get upset with him because he didn't
Really?
necessarily want all this money, as he
Just being
perceived it, probably going
thrown to
down the
other people.
drain.
Right. But
So
was
he was really a
Elvis in
person who
charge of
lived out
his
his
own
faith.
was he in charge of his own finances at that point, or
No, Elvis really never he never really ran the business side of things. That was
okay.
really what his dad did.
Oh, so Vernon
And
was more the business
yeah,
manager.
yeah,
Okay.
Elvis was the creative side. Colonel Tom Parker and really Elvis's father Vernon were much more of the business side.
So that kind of segues into my next question. Of course, I have to ask what you thought of the recent movie about Elvis, and what was it with Tom Hanks playing
Correct.
the pseudo villain, or however
Right.
the take is on it. So what was kind of your um, take on the film, especially right at the same time that you're releasing kind of the book as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really enjoyed the film, and I recognize the limitations of any movie about somebody's life, especially
Right.
Elvis's life, which was there's so much to cover. I mean, you could make a whole series of movies about Elvis's life, and you
Oh
probably
yeah.
never cover everything.
Right.
So I think you have to go into it knowing that they're coming at it from a certain standpoint. They're going to have a certain perspective on his life, and they're going to emphasize certain things. But I loved it because it really did show his humanity. It was super well done. It was creative. I loved the music they included in there, of course. And I'm kind of obsessed with the 68 comeback special. That's one of the
Okay.
pinnacles of television history.
Right.
And I love how in the movie they had an extended sequence devoted to just that special. So I
Yeah.
found that
Yeah.
really, really compelling. I thought the movie was great and loved it.
Oh, good. Do you think it overlaps a lot with the faith side, or do you feel like the book is going to be able to kind of take it to another level if for people who maybe have seen the film but get to see this whole other side of Elvis as well?
For sure. I think they're complementary because the movie is, in my perspective, the movie gives an entertaining and very, very fast paced overview of Elvis the man.
Right.
The book is going to dive specifically into that faith and spirituality side of Elvis that really the movie didn't
And
touch on
touch
significantly
on a
in
whole
any
lot.
way.
Right.
Not that I expected it to. So they're
No.
really two different animals, but I think they're super super complementary in terms of if you really want to get a full life, get a full picture of the life of Elvis, but then if you want to dive into the faith side of it, I think both of these are great.
That's what I think is really cool. I think that you're already getting kind of this hype from the film, and then
Right.
here in October, what's the official release date? October
Tuesday, October the 4th.
October the 4th, so
Mm-hmm.
it's literally just around the corner.
Yeah, just a few
So
weeks.
people can kind of delve into that other side of Elvis, which will be really excuse me, really fascinating, I think. So,
I think so.
and then about Billy Stanley, is there anything that you wanted to add about him, just like stories with Elvis? Like, is there a cute story of the brothers together that kind of struck you?
Oh my goodness. One of the things that I really took away from the book, and from just hearing Billy talk about Elvis and growing up with him, was that he was really funny and really really playful. And they would have times even when they were all adults when they would just be wrestling and sort of being silly and horsing around and you know driving super fast cars and going way way over the speed limit and it just sounds like life with Elvis was a lot of fun. And we just did a session yesterday, so we I recorded a conversation with Billy and his brother David.
Okay.
The third brother Rick, he passed away a few years ago, but
Okay.
we recorded a conversation that's actually going on the audiobook, which I thought
Oh,
was a lot of fun to be
nice.
involved in that.
Yes. When does the audiobook release? Is it same time or a little later?
Yes, same day.
Okay, perfect. For
What
all
I
of you
found so
audio listeners out there.
Yeah, I wanted to throw in what I found so compelling about that conversation was that even 45 years after Elvis passed away, they still get very emotional talking about it. I mean,
Hmm.
that really showed me how close they were and how much love they had for this
Mhm.
man who was not just a huge celebrity, but actually a big brother, a
A big
mentor,
brother.
a spiritual guide for them in many ways. And it's just really really moving because you see how much impact they had on how much impact he had on their lives, and they're still feeling that decades after Elvis is gone.
Right. Oh, that's that side that we don't normally see, we never think about, but I think that makes him more human, hearing how he interacted as a big
Absolutely,
brother,
absolutely,
because we can relate to that as non, not famous Elvis, but hearing, oh, he had that relationship with his brothers, which
yeah,
is really cool. I'm always intrigued to hear,
absolutely.
sibling stories that have that special bond. So that's really cool. Well, what's kind of one of the biggest takeaways you would say that you have from this experience and that you hope your readers kind of perceive?
Well, I would say two things. One maybe from a book content perspective, and the other from, I would say, a collaborative perspective. And I'll go with the one I mentioned first. First, I hope that people come away just with a better appreciation of who Elvis was as a person, because here, decades after he is gone, in some ways Elvis has become kind of a caricature of himself in popular culture,
Right.
because you see all the
Definitely.
Elvis impersonators. People will say they'll do like an Elvis accent, and you always know who they're doing.
Right. Or
But we've
Elvis wedding. Oh, I'm getting married in Vegas with Elvis as
exactly,
the.
exactly. So there's a segment to the modern view of Elvis that's very kitschy and sort of the gaudy,
Right.
crazy
Glitzy
decor
and
and all the gold belt buckles and all that stuff. And yes, that was a part of Elvis's act and his public persona, particularly in the
kind of his brand,
1970s.
if you will. Yeah.
It was part of his brand, especially like during the Vegas part. But if you really get to the heart of who he was as a person, that really wasn't what he was all about. That was an aspect of it, but that really doesn't get at the heart of who he was as a person who was so generous and so gifted, and such a just such an amazing ball of energy. It's funny because when you talk to people who knew Elvis, the one of the running themes that you'll hear about is how energetic he was, and I'm not exaggerating. I've heard more than one person say this. Whenever he walked into a room, you could feel his presence literally, because he had
Wow.
such an aura about him, or such an energy. And I've never heard anybody
Wow.
describe another person like that. But you can see that on
No.
stage. If you watch
Oh,
his
yeah.
performances, you can just see this energy like almost radiating off of him.
Right.
It's really fascinating.
I think they said the actor was Austin Butler had to just train and train and train to kind of get some of that same
Yeah,
energy for the film because yeah, I mean he was such an incredibly
yeah,
energetic entertainer.
yeah. The
So,
other thing I would throw in there, so I suppose the other main takeaway is for anybody who's listening who who is considering doing writing, or particularly if you want to do things like ghostwriting or collaboration, is you've got to really build your network so you can have these kinds of
mhm,
opportunities. I'm super grateful for
yes.
this. In many ways, to be honest with you, I feel like I didn't deserve this opportunity. I mean, I think we did a great job on the book, but there is an element to where I'm thinking I'm still kind of shocked I had the chance to be involved in this sort of a really cool thing,
Well, I
as a
think you
writer.
definitely deserved it. But yes.
Well, thank you, and I
But
appreciate that. But I would say
you have that
for
same side though to Elvis that you reach out to people and you always show that you care and that you're not too good for the people you're working with, which is wonderful.
yeah, and I think that is a really important insight, because it is easy once you've had a little bit of success in something to kind of get a big head about it. But you have to remember, it doesn't matter how quote unquote famous you get, you're there to serve people, and
Yes.
the higher that you rise in your levels of recognition or success or whatever metric you have, the higher you go with that, then the deeper you actually have to go in your service to people.
Yeah.
And Elvis really loved his fans. I think ultimately that's one of the things that really hurt him, is he had so much love and passion. He
Mhm.
just worked himself to death. Really,
Wow.
I don't think it's an exaggeration to even frame it in that way, to
Yeah.
some degree. Um, so yeah, maybe you can have too much love for people, to some extent, but we've got to really care about people. And he saw what he did as he did it out of love, not because he wanted to
Right.
be famous necessarily, but he loved his fans. He loved the people that he worked with, and he would go to any length possible to serve them and to help them however he could. So I think there's a good lesson there for all of us.
Definitely. Wow. That's perfect. I think that really sums up kind of his
Yeah.
life there. So, well, where can we find you and the book and all the goodies online that are coming up here in the fall?
Well, thanks. You can find the book on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, or really any place you can find books. It'll also be in bookstores. So if you're the kind of person who likes to stroll into bookstores and get your books that way, you can do it that way. And you can find out more about me. There's a couple places. One is my site for writers, which is called dailywriterlife.com.
And tell us
So
a
I
little
do
bit more about
actually,
that too, if there's aspiring writers listening.
yeah. So that is for people who want to work on their writing habits or even build a writing business. We talk a lot about mindset and success and habits and productivity. That's actually a daily email. That is a daily podcast. So for anybody who wants to build up that side of their life, this is the perfect resource. Actually, I just launched, so we're recording this on August the 16th. So just yesterday, a new page on my site went live. This is a series of guides for writers specifically. It's called the Daily Writer Starter Kit. And we have guides on um, writing habits, making money with your writing, time hacks for writers. So, in other words, how to be more productive, developing your pathway for success, and blogging and a bunch of other things. Those are all totally free. And you can get that by going to dailywriterlife.com/free. So that's one way writers can interact with me. But then my other site, kentsanders.net, is a place where people can go just to find out more about me in general and also ghostwriting services and those kinds of things. So basically, that's it.
Well, thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate it. And I can't wait. I've already pre ordered my copy of The
Cool.
Faith of
Thank you.
Elvis. So I can't wait to read it this fall.
Well, thank you. It's totally been my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Kent.